figure out where the commute's going to be and how long it's going to be and all the legwork.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilots, welcome back to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka. I am so stoked you're here, and I am going to talk all about commuting today with my buddy Adam. And we are going to dive deep into the world of commuting, what it's like, the highs and the lows. He has been commuting for many years. I have commuted for a few years, but then moved in base. And so you're going to get a lot of different perspective. And if you know somebody that's trying to decide whether or not they're going to commute for their job or try to live in base or what their life is going to look like, recommend this episode to them. Share this with them because it's got all sorts of great information. I'm excited for you to listen to Adam. He's been one of my best friends for a long, long time. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready for Pushback. Hey, pilot, did you just get a new conditional job offer? Are you getting out of the military and going to move your family across the country? Are you going to move in base somewhere, or are you going to go out to find that second home that you've been looking for? Well, I want you to stop right now, pick up the phone, and call Marty and the team at Trident Home Loans. It's an organization that's run by pilots. They understand pilot pay. They understand contracts. They understand military. They have the best VA loans in the United States. Marty and his team have been doing mortgages for years. They've been doing my mortgages for years. I trust him and his team more than any other organization. I challenge you to get a better deal anywhere else. Go ahead, reach out, get a mortgage quote, and then call Marty and his team. They will walk you through the process and show you how competitive their rates are. So go right now, tridenthomeloans.com, and check them out. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Also, you can join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance and strategies for professional pilots on the brand new Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. All right, I am sitting here with a dear friend of mine, my friend Adam Cockrell. Dude, what's up, man?
Not much, brother. Good to be here. How you doing?
Dude, I am so good. I'm so glad that we get to have this conversation together. For those of you that don't know, Adam and I have been long time friends. And as I was stewing on the idea of the podcast and everything else like that, we've been talking about this for a long time. So I'm excited to have him. And Adam, why don't you give me a snapshot of who you are and what you are currently doing?
Yeah, no problem. So I fly for a major airline in the United States right now. And prior to that, I was in the regionals for about 4 years, commuting the entire time. And on top of all of that, I still do the military part-time, National Guard, as an infantry officer. So I do a lot of traveling, a lot of getting on Jumpseats to go to and from work over the years, and then balancing that with my military life, wife and family, kids, the whole 9 yards. And currently, right now, we're on vacation in the beautiful Daytona Beach, enjoying some Mai Tais, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's like 8:30 in the morning where I am. So I guess it's a little later for you. So you can have the Mai Tais. It's totally cool. Adam is one of the volunteers from Professional Pilots of Tomorrow, PPOT, and he does an awful lot with the community, with the aviation community as a whole. And what I love about Adam is he mentioned he's in the Guard, like he's not a pilot in the Guard. He never has been. He is straight up like bootstraps, like make it happen for himself. And it is a really cool thing. And so the other twist in this is Adam's wife also is a pilot at a major airline.
That's right.
And they have children and they both commute. If worst case scenario, can you drive to work?
It's 7 hours. to get to work. So absolute worst case with a 12-hour call out, I could, but there's no way that I would ever want to do that, but I can drive to work.
Okay.
We make it work with that in the background.
Yeah. So you live in Alabama and your commuting place is Texas. So let's talk to the pilot listening who is thinking about, man, I want to go to a regional, or I'm going to go to a major wherever, and I'm going to spend my life commuting. Like, what do we need to tell them? What do they need to know?
Yeah, so the first thing is this overarching theme of commuting is it is what you make of it. If you don't mind the things that we're going to talk about, then commuting is not a terrible option. I've commuted from Mobile to Chicago, Mobile to Dallas, Mobile to Houston, various different bases. And honestly, most of them have not been bad commutes. Now, there's been stressful moments, but they have been relatively good commutes. So the overarching theme of this whole thing, when I'm going to kind of explain stuff, is that I chose to be a commuter at the end of the day. And so did my wife, because of the benefits that commuting offers us. Kind of starting off, you have to make that decision for yourself to determine if you think, let's say your airline's based in New York and you're not a fan of New York City, JFK, LaGuardia, you'd rather live out in the middle of the wilderness, then obviously commuting is probably going to be what you do. So that's kind of the first thing you have to take a look at. How do you want to live? And then after that, honestly, or lack of better words, got to kind of just suck it up and figure out where the commute's going to be and how long it's going to be and all the airports you're going to go to and in and out of and do all the legwork before you decide to be a commuter. So that's the two things. Determine your personal life, do the homework before you say, I'm going to go to an airline and commute here, because it has its rough days.
Tell me about getting ready for a trip and how you plan it, how you plan your commute to and from work.
Yeah, so here's the first part of it. So let's just say, for example, my airline has me flying out of XYZ airport and that's where I'm based. I look at all the airports that are around me within an hour or 2 hours.
So you're in Mobile. What airports are you looking at?
So let's say I'm looking at Houston, for example, out of Mobile, right? I will take a look at Houston and say, I got to get to Houston. But at Mobile, I have the option of Mobile Regional, Pensacola, an hour to the east, Gulfport, an hour to the west, and New Orleans, an hour past Gulfport, so 2 hours to the west. So I'll take a look at it. And the very first decision I'll make is time, right? Which one has me home the most with the kids, even if I have to drive 2 hours away? And which one has me, after looking at time, which one gives me the best option to make it to and from work? Contrary to what a lot of people may think, most of us want to get to work. Like, we like the airlines that we fly for. We want to represent them. We want to be able to get to work at a reasonable hour, be well rested. So after looking at time at home and what can get me to work, it kind of helps me determine which airport I would go to. So let's just take this, for example. If I fly out of New Orleans, 2 hours from my house in Mobile, instead of Mobile, there's 13 or 14 flights a day, versus Mobile, where there's only 2 or 3 flights a day. And on top of that, there's rules with commuting as far as you can have the jump seat on your company's own airplane, which between Mobile and the airport that I'm based out of has most of those, the lion's share of those 12, 13 flights a day. So my options, even if I have to drive further, my options are better going out of New Orleans. And that's the decision-making point that I typically tend to use. So a 2-hour drive to New Orleans, a 52-minute flight to my airport that I'm based at, 3 hours. It's not really the end of the world. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. So a quick point of reference here. Let's say you fly for Endeavor and the planes that come in and out of your airport are Delta planes.
Yep.
You do not qualify as like the most like top priority person to get the jump seat. The Delta pilot would get that priority. So I think that's an important thing to drive home, is your company medal, not just like the logo on the tail, right?
Right. But there's 2 parts to it that I want people to understand. One, it's the logo on the tail, company medal, but it's also where in the airplane you sit that determines priority. So for example, if you fly for Endeavor and it's a Delta mainline aircraft and you're sitting in the front in the cabin in the in the front of the jump seat, then if a Delta pilot shows up, that Delta pilot has the right to take that jump seat before you do on Delta medal. And they all generally work the same. However, it's an Endeavor airplane, and you're an Endeavor pilot, then you have the right to have the jump seat ahead of them. The difference that really the airlines begin to differ those rules is when you look at the cabin itself. Some airlines are first come, first serve inside the cabin. It doesn't matter if you fly for, I don't know Delta's and Endeavor's rules in particular, but they could say something like how an American does. Doesn't matter if you fly for Delta or Endeavor or Envoy or American. you are the first person listed and checked in for a seat in the cabin, you get it first. So there's two different parts of that. It's one, the cabin of the aircraft, and two, your own aircraft's metal. So me as a pilot for a major airline, it's not Spirit, but I use Spirit a lot to get from New Orleans to Houston. Now I am bottom of the barrel for the jump seat. I'm bottom of the barrel for a cabin seat also if another Spirit person shows up, depending on when I checked in. And those rules kind of differ in here and there for each one. I got to tell you, the worst time that I've ever had was jump seating two legs on two different airlines that were not my personal airline that I flew for at the time. So I was flying for a regional, but jump seating on mainline for two major carriers for a two-leg commute from Mobile via Atlanta or Houston to get to Chicago was somewhat difficult. But that's kind of how they break the cabin.
Yeah.
Or break the jump.
Talk to me about life with a one-leg commute versus a two-leg commute.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. So the one caution I would have of anybody considering commuting is before you decide if you want to commute, if you want to be a commuter, live within an area that you can have a one-leg commute. Now, two-leg commutes are very difficult because a lot of times what happens with that first leg will determine the second leg. So most of the carriers for said unions, ALPA or Teamsters or whatever, require two flights to be able to get to your airport that you're based out of. So if you have a two-leg commute, and let's say you go from, let's just say Mobile over to Atlanta, the two flights start from when you leave Mobile to Atlanta or Mobile to wherever airport, and then from Atlanta to, let's say, Chicago. So if I have one flight getting me from Mobile to Atlanta, and then two flights from Atlanta to Chicago, that's still not legal because I have to have a flight getting me from a second flight from Mobile to Atlanta or from Mobile to another airport before I get to Chicago, let's say Dallas. So I have to have that first leg has to have two different flights in two different directions. And both of those directions, direction A and direction B, also have to have two flights getting you to your home airport. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so it might be a little confusing, but let me break it down like this. Each flight that you have is adding time onto the fact. If you have an 8 a.m. start time for your reserve period or for your line or whatever it is in Chicago, and you've got to go from Mobile to Chicago, you're going to be leaving the day before to get there because there is zero chance that you can make it anywhere at 8 a.m., even in the same time zone. And that is a huge, huge thing to consider. When Adam and I were flying for the same regional, I was living in Pensacola and I was commuting two legs to Chicago, and I was a junior reserve pilot. And man, it was 15 days a month on. But on the other side of that, I essentially had to fly up the day before my sequence, and then I would have to fly home the day after because I was so junior. I had lousy times, lousy schedules. And so my 15 days a month gone actually was more along the lines of 19 or 20 or 21 days a month. Have you had any of that?
Yeah, you know what? I have. And I've been very fortunate to be able to make my schedule work on the front end for the current company right now. But even still, even though I have relatively good seniority as a first officer on the back end, I still experience it coming home. So a lot of people will say, yes, they'll actually turn it to 19, 21 days off, right? When you're junior, like you said. But even when you get relatively senior, it still is difficult. Most of my start times for my current airline are later in the day. Most of my end times are after the last flight leaves to go home. And I've gone up half the seniority list in my current major airline right now. So yes, absolutely. I've ran into it now. I ran into it in the past. Like you said, we both commute out of Mobile and Pensacola at the same time, and it just becomes a hassle. It happens a lot. I tell people this too. If you really want to commute and you really are thinking about the fact that you want to live somewhere that's different than your actual base, the other big part of it too is if you're married and you have kids, make sure they understand that fact, because a 15-day schedule and a 21-day schedule are drastically different on your personal life when you're at home.
Yeah, it's a little exhausting too. Talk to me about cargo. You've commuted on cargo before.
Oh, yeah. So I say this, if it's there, use it to go home. I don't care what time it is. I'll fall asleep in the terminal if I have to, or in the crew room, and then get up at 9, 10 p.m. and go catch a cargo flight home. But cargo should be your last resort going to work. And here's why I say that. Unless you have a late night start, which doesn't happen very often at the majors, It's more common to have a morning or early afternoon start. You're not going to get the adequate rest that you need. That's the idea, the overarching theme. Here's the deal. Cargo is really commuter friendly. Think about it, right? If I went from Mobile to Memphis and then Memphis to, let's just say, Chicago, there's a decent amount of pilots that may live in Memphis, but Memphis is not a base for any regional airline pilots. So therefore, there's a lot of people that do not commute out of Memphis. But if I decide to take airline from Mobile to Houston and then go Houston to Chicago, there's a lot of airline pilots. All that being said, there's a high probability that you'll be able to get on a jump seat for a cargo carrier. The bad thing is you're going to fly all night long. You're going to leave the house at 8 p.m., catch a 9 p.m. flight on, say, FedEx, get to Memphis at 10:30. You're going to sit there in an uncomfortable chair until about midnight, 1, 2 a.m. Then you're going to get on the next leg if you got to go, if you're not based out of Memphis. The next leg to go from Memphis to Chicago, you're going to land at 5:30, 6 a.m. So you have to count that into effect that you're not getting a good night's sleep and you're not safe and you're not ready to go fly. So I would use it to get to work if I knew that I had the whole day off before and I wasn't starting until, say, 6 p.m. That way, if I'm getting it at 6 a.m., I got 12 hours to be able to get my rest and sleep before I start flying.
Okay, 6 a.m., you got there on FedEx, you're exhausted. How do you get that rest?
Yeah, so here's the deal. If I'm exhausted, to me, personally, I plan ahead, right? So I start adjusting my internal circadian rhythm ahead because chances are, if I'm starting at 6 p.m. for my current airline, I'm flying all night anyway, or close to it. I'm not going to get into bed till 2 or 3 a.m. So I'll start days before. What I'll do typically is I'll tend to stay up late and stay up later to the point of where I'm going to bed now in the morning or close to it to get my body ready. So by the time I show up for that FedEx flight to commute, for me, I can stay awake for the whole time I'm commuting, because most people don't understand you're going to go through Memphis. Just take FedEx, for example. You're going to go through Memphis 99% of the time and sit there for 3 or 4 hours before you get on that second leg to commute to wherever you're going. So I will adjust my circadian rhythm where I'll catch a quick cat nap in the crew room over at Memphis, 45 minutes or so, wake up, get a small cup of coffee for that second leg into Chicago, and then I'm already tired by the time I get there. I've already spent 2 days adjusting my internal circadian rhythm or my internal rhythm before, and I pass right out as soon as I get to the hotel that I may be staying at. When I get it in the morning, wake up at, say, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and go fly all night for my current airline.
Who pays for that hotel?
Me. Yeah, unfortunately, this guy. And ask me who's happy about me paying for my own hotel, not my wife. So, the big factor.
How much do you think you spend a month in hotels?
Oh, man. That it varies so much. It's easier for me to say high end and low end. On the high end, I'm a guy who will stay at the Ramada Inn. I don't care if it's got a roof and 3 out of 4 walls. I'm fine with it. On the low end, $40 a stay, probably 3 nights maybe. So $120 a month roughly. On the high end, if I have a bunch of trips that just don't make sense, $200 a month. Big factor in your financial planning. And that's worst case scenario on the $200 a month.
Yeah. Have you ever called in fatigued in the first leg?
I have not, but looking back on it, I should have. I've done some things in airplanes as far as fatigue go that I'm not proud of. No, I never compromised safety according to any federal standards and to any personal standards, but I've come close on my personal standards. And it's almost all factored into my commute. Back when Nick and I were flying for the regionals, I used to commute 2 legs in, fly 18 legs in 4 days, and commute 2 legs back. During the holidays, those 2 legs to base and 2 legs from base were almost always on the jump seat. That's 22 legs in 4 days on the jump seat. And there's times where if you wake up to catch the 6 a.m. flight out of Mobile, 2-legged to Chicago, get there, get a quick hour or 2 rest, then you think you're okay and you're good. And again, you're not violating any FARs. You're feeling good. But cumulatively, by day 4, you're pretty tired. And so you're coming on that last day, you're still fine. But on that jump seat, you don't want to be the guy falling asleep. So I've never fatigued because I've never gotten to that point of where I couldn't operate an airplane. I've never called in fatigue. But being on that jump seat on that last leg going into Mobile, thinking about if I was flying the airplane, it would absolutely be a no-go. So I'm not super familiar with the fatigue calls.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this. I would tell you, for those of you that have never been in a jump seat before, the whole idea of the jump seat is you're the 3rd crew member. You are a member of that crew. And you look at I think it was Korean Air that crashed in San Francisco and the 777 landed short.
Oh, they got it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who it was. That's right. And they faulted the jump seater who was sitting there and didn't make the appropriate calls to help to encourage them to do the correct thing. And he saw that they were going to land short.
Yep.
That's important.
Yeah.
You are a member of that crew. So if you're tired as hell, like you just got to make sure that you are able to, if they ball it up, you're going to be as responsible as the captain and the first officer.
The big factor there absolutely is you're responsible, but also a lot of people may think, well, if I fly for, say, American and I'm on Delta jump seat, I should be good, right? Nope, doesn't matter. If you're a qualified person sitting in that jump seat, doesn't matter what airline you fly for, doesn't matter your aircraft type. You are a part of the crew, and that's part of all of our jump seaters.
Yeah, that actually they had recently the Southwest pilot became incapacitated, and the jump seater helped the FO make it happen.
Yeah, sure did. Absolutely.
Yeah, 2 different airlines just making it happen. So that's, I mean, you just got to be ready for all of that. How about getting home?
Ooh, so yeah, getting home is a tough one. Here's why. Because the airline cares about you getting to work, and the airline cares about you getting home.
Sort of.
But if you're an airline and you're in business to kind of make money, which one, if you had to weigh against the other, would be more important to the airline? Now, my current airline is very family friendly. So I'm not saying this in the guise that they don't care about my family. But when there's 190, 200 people depending on you to fly an airplane in the back of an airplane, they want you to get to work. So when your flight ends and you say, hey, I have one more flight left to get me home, and all the seats are full, no one's coming to help you. So you got to figure that out on your own. So if the seats are full, you're going to spend the night somehow. But getting home when there are seats, I'll tell you this much, it is not something that is very, how do I put this? It changes quickly. When people are flying home, so, okay, let's take this for example. I may take off out of San Francisco and fly to, say, Dallas, right? And then from Dallas, I'm trying to go home to Mobile, and I'm trying to get on a commuter flight to go home at 7:30 p.m. I may check that flight at noon before I take off out of San Francisco, and there could be 25 open seats. Great. Awesome. No worry, I'll be home. However, there's 26 other people doing the same thing because we're all going home. So by the time I live in Dallas, I look at that again. I got 45 minutes until that flight departs. Pull out my phone, take a look at it. Those 26 seats are all gone. And oh, by the way, another flight canceled that was going into Mobile. And now everyone that was on that airplane has now gotten enrolled over to my flight that I'm trying to get home on. So getting home becomes a very dynamic situation. It changes a lot faster than getting to and from work. Now, I personally have probably been left more times getting home than I have getting to work because of that.
Yeah. And if you're lucky, you've got a really cool captain on that flight that's going to walk up the jet bridge and make sure that all the pilots got on that need to get on as long as there's room. I've only gotten left one time. I got left.
Oh,
yes. I got left
lucky.
In Houston by a dude from Mesa. And it was the last flight in, and I was not based in Houston. And I had gone there trying to do the game, right? I was like, okay, well, if I go to Houston, there's 2 seats open, then I can go from here to there and there to there and there to there. And I'm playing it. I get there, and the guy doesn't like jump seaters. So it was like this dude and a boomer captain, man, want to crush him. And he left me. And there I was, and I had to go get a hotel in the middle of Houston.
Dude, that's a dynamic within itself, especially when people leave you and don't take care of each other for jump seats or non-revs. That's a huge dynamic within itself that really, as a lifelong commuter, and you've been there too, or you just grind your gears, to say lack of better words.
Yeah, and the people that are listening to this episode are people learning about commuting. And I'll say that if there is... what's going to happen is it's all going to come back around, and someday you're going to be the captain, and there's going to be somebody looking to get on your jump seat, and you are going to have to be that person to have the conversation with a gate agent to get that pilot on. Man, protecting us pilots and getting them where they need to go, it's so important. And so I just remember that. Put that in the back of your head, right?
Yeah, I don't want to scare anybody away. If somebody's thinking about commuting, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, Adam and Nick just said we get left. It's such a rare occurrence. It's not a weekly thing. And usually, honestly, most of the people I talk to that are jump seaters and commuters, I want to call it an unofficial community, right? Like, we all understand what it is and what people go through. So as a commuter, sometimes I'm sitting with the captain that may have been around for 25 years, and he's like, oh, I hate jump seaters. Like, okay, man. Well, I personally always check to see if we have a jump seater or commuters. And it's a conversation that I like to have, especially if I'm at an airport that's, hub to hub, where I know there's going to be 30 or 40 commuters every flight trying to go back and forth. So it's a conversation I like to have with the captain. And so don't please, people listening, don't think it's something that happens all the time and shy away from commuting because of that purpose.
Yeah. And I'll also say for those, like when I lived in Pensacola, I would commute to Miami and I was flying for the regional. And Pensacola, there are more pilots per square foot in Pensacola and that region than anywhere else in the world. And it's just so many pilots.
Yeah, absolutely.
And go ahead.
I do not do Pensacola. Absolutely. It's only an hour from my house, and I don't do it because of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a ton of commuting pilots. But what would happen is we would chat each other up and we would get to know one another. And I got so many letters of recommendation from just being part of their little community. And the good part is I knew that if I stayed in Pensacola, like these are new friends that I've got and cool people and people I can learn from. And they know all the tricks too.
Yeah, absolutely do. Absolutely. Most of those guys have been, because, right, Navy guys retired to Pensacola. You got the whole gambit. Guys that have been there for 25 years, flying for an airline for 25 years. You get, guys that just retired, whatever the case may be. I actually learned more about how to jump seat and non-rev from other jump seaters and non-revs than I did from any of the airlines I've ever worked for. Telling you, hey, try this out.
So what do you do if you commuted home or you commuted out to work in Mobile and then you could only make it to New Orleans on the way home?
So that's a tough one. I've actually had this happen a few times because think about where I live, right? New Orleans, you got Mardi Gras. Mobile, you also have Mardi Gras. In Pensacola, God forbid I go there, but it's happened a few times. You got spring break. You got military leave, during Christmas. So that happens a lot. So what I do, I was one time in almost a decade, one time my wife decided to come drive out to New Orleans and come get me 2 hours one way and 2 hours back. I say that to say don't rely on your spouse to do that all the time because they have other lives, things they're doing too. But
you say that to say, hey, I love you. Thank you so much for picking me up.
She's going to hear this podcast probably in a week or two as a commuter. So thanks, babe. I love you. There you go. That's my plug. No, I've done a bunch of one-way rental cars. Another factor to add in. You do it once a month. Usually they tag on about an $80 to $100 fee for a one-way drop-off, in addition to the $40-50 a day for the rental car. But I've only done that if it's a reason I have to be home. Remember, you mentioned before, my wife and I are both pilots. So if I know she's leaving for a trip, we never cut it close where I'd get home one day and she leaves the next day. But if I get home one day and it's one day off that we're both home before she leaves, I need that buffer, so I'm going to get home. If that's not a factor, then I'll simply just get to New Orleans sometimes and just get a hotel for the night and get up at 5 a.m. because it's cheaper than get a $40 hotel room versus a $140 one-way rental. So financially, factor all that stuff in there.
Yeah, it's time and money, right? And there's this, so you're going to pay with one of them.
Yep. And the other thing too for commuters, statistically, we make less because of the fact that we're picking trips that start later and end earlier. So let's just say a 4-day block pays 25 hours and you want to get 4 of those trips. Now, for people listening, like, hey, what's a block? A block is just your set schedule for that 2, 3, 4, 5 days that you're working every week out of the month. So if I do a 4-day block that's worth 25 hours, 4 weeks out of the month, that's 100 hours. That trip, I can almost guarantee you no airline in the United States, except for maybe Southwest because they rig their trips differently, is not going to start late enough for you to commute the same day and earlier enough for you to commute home the same day. So you have 2 options: show up the day before or stay to the day after, or both, which means you're shelling out money for hotels and things like that every month. Or pick a trip that instead of 25 hours that week, now it's 20 hours. So if you lose 5 hours on 4 trips, do the math, that's 20 hours lost. You went from 100 hours to 80 hours. Or you could do the 100-hour trip and shell out a couple $100 for hotels, crash pads, whatever you want to do. So the huge downside of the commuter life is you're going to lose money as opposed to the guy that can wake up, the man or woman that can wake up at 5 a.m., be to the airport by 6:30 in the morning, and then just fly that full 25-hour block.
How about picking up extra flying?
I don't do it. You can, and I encourage it, but I don't do it because the wife and I are both pilots. And at the end of the day, that extra flying is more time. We already have very limited time together with her and I and the kids, so I don't do it. It's easier now than it used to be for people that do it because of we're currently short both pilots and pay. And a lot of airlines, especially during the holidays, are paying 200%, 300%, 150%. I mean, that adds up real quick. They pick up an extra trip. Here's my trick to it. Now, my airline currently doesn't really offer these kind of trips, but some airlines do. If you know that you have to commute home and let's say you land at your airport in San Francisco at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and your flight to commute home to LA is at 7:30 at night. Your airline, somewhere in OT, they might have a turn in there where you just fly from San Fran up to Seattle and back. They may leave at 2, get back by 6, and you'll still make your 7:30 commute flight home. That makes sense to pick up OT. You know that 4 hours of flying at 200% may mean you could take a vacation a month later because you paid for it already.
Yeah, it can add up fast. The other side of that coin is also then the weather comes in Seattle and you're stuck and you miss your commute home. So
it's a risk. It's a risk.
There's risk, right? So roll the dice how you're going to want to roll the dice. I commuted for almost 5.5 years and I hate it.
Yep. But see, I've commuted for over 6 and I love it. I honestly love commuting. And I guarantee you if there's any pilots that have been flying for the majors or the regionals now have been commuting for more than a couple of years, they're going to probably want to shoot me in the face for saying this. I'm not encouraging people to commute. Do what's best for you. I love it because I need that time. Remember, I got a wife that's a pilot. I have 3 kids at home. It can be chaotic in my house. So I need that time just for me mentally. And Nick, you got kids too, so I'm sure you can understand what I'm saying. I just need an hour or two to not think about the fact that I de-iced 16 times over the last 4 days and it's eating through my shoes.
Yeah.
And I like it.
I love my family, but I'm sure there are some days where I'm going to wish I was a commuter so I could just go get a hotel room. But
yeah. Plus, I live in Mobile. I think the secret's out there. Mobile is not exactly the most expensive place to live in the world. So I can afford a really good quality of life off an airline pilot salary living in Mobile.
Yeah, that's another cool thing is if you choose wisely and you live in a place that doesn't have a high cost of living, your money goes a long way. And you're going to live in Atlanta, you're going to pay a lot of money. But
100%.
But if you live in Clemson, South Carolina, and you commute in from Greenville, Spartanburg, like your money, you're the richest guy in town. Maybe not in Clemson, but maybe in like some other small town outside of Spartanburg. I don't know.
By the way, I love GSP. It's a beautiful area.
It's a great airport. Absolutely. All right. So I have one more question. What about FedEx and commuting? Like, do you sleep on the boxes or what do you do?
Yeah. So when you commute on FedEx, it's a lot of people don't understand the dynamic on their airplanes, right? Their fleet types, there's jumps totally different. Some of their jump seats are on the flight deck. Some of them are back there with where the boxes are. If I'm on the jump seat on the flight deck, I don't sleep. I never do, never will, because you're part of the crew. We talked about that earlier. If something goes wrong, it's against the rules. Both ALPA and most carriers tell you don't do it. If I'm sitting in the back behind the bulkhead where there's no interaction or interface with the flight deck, I pass right out sometimes because I give those pilots credit. I can't fly that late at night consistently. So the rules for them are different because every 121 carrier that's passenger, the jump seats are on the flight deck. So me personally, sometimes I actually like commuting on a FedEx or a UPS. But when you do commute on them, it's not the same check-in process, for example, or to list for a jump seat, which means you're calling the airline to say, can I please get a seat on your flight? So that process changes. It's a little different. Then once you show up there, you're not going through a big international airport where they have KCM and all these things. It's pretty quick from soup to nuts. There's a gate, there's a security person, and there's usually a cursory bag search, sometimes a metal detector when you're flying out of, say, Mobile, Brooklyn, where Airbus is, on the only 2 FedEx flights they have that night. So it's pretty quick once you park your car to being on the airplane, which is a huge benefit. And then once you actually get on the airplane, and if you're, like I said, on the flight deck side or on the back side, it depends on how you want to rest. If you're on the flight deck side, I don't rest. Once you land in Memphis, you got to sit there while they sort packages. Once you land in Louisville, same thing. Sit there while they sort packages. And then you fly your next leg to wherever you're going if you're not based there. The downside about commuting on cargo is that most of their flights on UPS will go through Louisville or Miami. Most of the flights on FedEx will go through Indianapolis or Memphis, mostly Memphis. So if you're commuting 2 legs, it's very rare to see something like San Francisco to JFK. You're going to have to go sit for that 4-hour or 3-hour sort of packages. Now they got a big, huge terminal full of honey buns and Monster energy drinks and all the stuff that all of us over 40-year-olds shouldn't be eating. But hey, whatever works.
Yeah, we'll probably do a whole nother episode about eating healthy on the road too, because nobody wants to be the poster child of fat pilots of Instagram.
Yeah, not at all. I refuse. My wife wouldn't like that. Neither would I.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I got kids. I'm broke.
That's right. Yeah, bring your own food, people.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. And I would also like to bring around the point that you need friends from other airlines.
You do.
How many times do you text me? We fly for different airlines.
All the time. Hey, I need help with a load. I have to go through Atlanta to get to Mobile. Hey, man, I have no idea how this works. Just not even Jumpseat related, just random stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And, we got the families and everything, and we're trying to figure out how to move them around. Yeah, we talk weekly.
Yeah, there's constant churn in the commuting world, trying to manage, okay, what planes are empty, which ones, what are my options, where could I possibly go? And if you're commuting, you're going to be reaching out to people at your sister airlines all the way across for your whole career. You just are. And so it behooves you to be a really good person.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you do not want to be that guy that everyone ignores your text when you're desperately trying to get home on Christmas Eve so you can wake up to see your family on Christmas. Do not want to be that guy because your family's not going to be happy when you say, hey, I'm not getting home until 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas Day versus 9 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Oh, yeah.
And on the flip side of that, you are going to be at your house someday receiving texts from that person trying to commute home, and you're going to be at Christmas dinner and step away so that you can dig into your company and see how many seats are available for them so that they can be safe too. That's how it goes.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I've done that to you a few times and we're like, hey, dude, stuck in Atlanta. Do I need to go back to Charlotte or can I just go straight to Mobile? I know.
That's right.
All right.
It's funny.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I would also say that we were classmates together at our regional way back, but that's how we really linked up, was commuting and commiserating, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And look at us now doing the same thing.
2 different major carriers, which, by the way,
that's right.
You guys are doing really good right now. I'm not going to say who we fly for, but pretty happy about it.
Let's just keep the power on and keep people butts in seats. That's what we need. Getting people buying tickets.
Absolutely. Across the board.
Man. Adam, thank you so much for spending some time. I know you're on vacation right now with your family and you stepped away for 40 minutes to record a podcast with your buddy. So thank you. Tell your beautiful bride that I appreciate her letting me borrow you. And I want you to go drink some more Mai Tais and go down to the pool, my man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I just got a bunch of angry texts about 2 minutes ago from my wife, so got to get down there before she loses her mind. But I appreciate it, man. It's always good to talk to you. And yeah, hope I help some people out with this whole thing.
This is important. Before you go, you need to know that 2024 is going to be unbelievably competitive in the world of pilot hiring. And you need to make sure that you separate yourself from the herd. The only way that you can guarantee that you'll land your dream job is by partnering with Spitfire Elite Interview Consulting. We are the only choice for application review and interview prep. We are the partners that you've been looking for from start to finish, and it's never too early to be part of our community. Just go over to my website, spitfireelite.com, and use the coupon code R4P to save yourself 10% on all of our services. Again, that's the letter R, the number 4, and the letter P to save 10%. So go out there and slay your interviews.